Welcome to 24 Lives Per Second, Guernsey's only movie podcast. Let's cut to the chase. This is episode 9, Big Ridley style, bumper edition. My name is Wynter Titan, and I'm not sure that I can stomach another viewing of Nick Hahola's parachuting fashion shoot again. With me, as always, are Russ Kellaway.
Hello.
Pete Taylor.
Hello.
And today we're also joined by film enthusiast Claire Mockett from the local band Life Jacket.
Hello.
And BBC Radio Guernsey's Tom Girard.
Oh, my BBC Guernseys, hello.
Well, you're your own man as well, we accept that. In this episode we will be reviewing the latest releases at the Mallard, including Snow White and the Huntsman, Men in Black 3, and of course Ridley Scott's much anticipated Alien prequel-ish Prometheus. We will also take a quick look at what we've been watching. First up, it's fairy tale time with Snow White and the Huntsman.
It's the sound of battles fought and lives lost. It once pained me to know that I am the cause of such despair. But now, their cries give me strength. Beauty is my power. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is fairest of them all?
You are the fairest, but there is another destined to surpass you. Consume her heart and you shall live forever.
Find me someone who doesn't fear the dark forest to hunt her down.
Why is she of such value?
That is none of your concern.
If I refuse?
Lips red as blood, hair black as night. Bring me your heart, my dear, dear Snow White.
Kirsten Stewart is Snow White, Chris Helmsworth is the Huntsman, and Charlize Theron is the Wicked Queen. Following hot on the heels of Tarzan Singh's Mirror Mirror, this is yet another retelling of the famous fairy tale. Russ, what's your take on this one?
I liked it, if I'm honest with you. I watched it and I went to see it. I had no expectations of it. I hadn't seen Mirror Mirror, which I know you'd seen, and didn't like very much. Like the visuals, obviously, with Tarzan Singh, but the actual film was a bit strange. I think because I had relatively no expectations, I was actually very surprised by it. I thought it was it ended up being a bit Snow White, kind of via Joan of Arc and Braveheart, and then chucking a little bit of Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson, swirly camera as well, which was kind of, hanging about in the background. It was a pretty good looking film. I thought it was shot quite nicely. It was a bit too glistening for me. It was kind of a little bit too, I don't know what the word is really, post productionized, if you will. But that's just my minor thing. Looking at it as a fairy tale, because it was almost trying to break away from being that fairy tale, but I think it kind of ended up having everything that a good fairy tale story should have. I think it was quite dark at times, but it kind of balanced it out with a good bit of kind of lightheartedness and things like that. It had a good bit of comedy side on it. I thought the dwarfs were quite good. I thought they had some cracking actors in there, kind of playing those parts, and actually the way they shot those kind of the little people as big people as little people was brilliant. I thought it was kind of flawless in technical terms in terms of how it did that. And I was expecting it to be really quite sickly and twee, and it wasn't. It followed through on its kind of on its aims and kind of got to where it wanted to be. I mean, Kristen Stewart, I'm not a massive fan of, so I don't think she was amazing kind of in that main role. But that's partly a Twilight bias, which unfortunately she's going to have for the rest of her career. She's got to work quite hard to get out of that kind of hole for me. But yeah, so I liked it. I almost ashamedly so, but I did enjoy it, and that's the way it is.
Right, okay. I mean, I saw it last night. I quite enjoyed it. I thought it had a nice sort of labyrinth, never-ending story sort of feel to it as well. And Kristen Stewart, I mean, I think she gets a bit of a hard time from the critics. I've got nothing, personally, I've got nothing against her acting-wise. She's certainly as good as many other people who are in the film. Tom, Claire, what did you guys think of it?
Well, it's weird. I didn't not enjoy it, but I didn't particularly enjoy it either. It just sort of, it seemed to be a really good concept of going, we'll take a fairy tale and do something a bit different, possibly a bit grittier, a bit more Lord of the Ringsy with it. But then someone, rather than writing a script, got a book of cliches and threw them at a page, and that's pretty much everything. Sounded like it was every line was something out of Star Wars. There were loads of Yoda lines in there and things like that, and just sort of left it going, well, why? This looks nice. It's a decent idea, but there's just nothing in the dialogue or anything with it.
But wouldn't you say that was the point of sort of fairy tale genre, to, you know, sort of the recycling of stories and characters and so on?
Well, I guess it could be, but it was all stuff I'd seen 100 times before done better, or just so cliche dialogue-wise that it was kind of, there was nothing for anyone to act with either, which I'm not sure if what's her face from Twilight is any good or not, because I've not seen Twilight, but she wasn't any good in this, and Chris Hemsworth was just being Thor.
When you talked about it, you compared to a couple of films, I was thinking about Stardust, because that's a really good...
Yeah.
One of those kind of fantasy
That was a
things
good
that
film.
does something a bit different. I was just thinking, is it
It is
in
very
any way
much,
like that?
Yeah,
or
I mean, but you got to Stardust cherry picked a lot from fairy tales.
Yeah.
So I think it's because the whole story about the evil queen after the soul or heart, whatever, fits right into Stardust. So you do think about that. But you can't get away from that. But I think you can't really say that it nicked things from Stardust, because the things that are inherent in its story were taken for that film, I think.
And Claire, what do you think of it?
Well, I like fairy tales, but I thought this film just stole from too many. I thought that it looked fantastic, but then I saw so many other films in it, and it wasn't just an inspirational thing. It was actually taken from other films. Definitely agree with the Labyrinth stuff. There was a kind of a lot of, especially with the dwarfs, reminded me a lot of characters from Labyrinth. But I'm also referring to other films that had nothing to do with fairy tales. So there was a couple of Stephen King references within the film as well. Well, there was this scene where she basically almost breathed in the essence from somebody else, and it was a complete rip-off from The Green Mile. And so there was little drops of other films in it. So I felt like I wasn't actually watching an original film. I felt like I was watching a tapestry of everything else. Throw in a couple of perfume adverts, and that's basically how I felt.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do love the story, and I do love like Cinderella, Snow White, and to put it into real live action after watching it from Disney, I thought it's a very, very risky place to go, because it could go awfully wrong or it could go right. I think for the Twilight people, it suited them very well.
Was it in Twilight? I was just thinking, you were saying about it stealing lots, stealing lots of stuff, because me and Russ were talking about Rango before, which is very much a homage to all these films, and like Shrek, which is a good example of, I know it's more of a comedy, but it takes lots of different fairy tales and sort of does it in a clever way.
A parody almost.
Yeah, but this was just straight lifting out and not doing anything clever with it.
And Charlize Theron's performance was so ham acted that I thought I was watching someone who was desperately wanted to be in Shakespeare, and then I watched somebody else who is just wanted to be referred to as a serious actress. The acting was coming from all different angles. I thought that how it looked was fantastic, but the direction of it I thought was all over the place.
I mean, I've got to say, one of the things that bothered me about it was it's just too long.
Oh yeah, I got very restless.
I turned to Katie and I said, how long have we been in here? Because even though it was quite good,
have a
and there's
that's
a
how I
lot of
felt.
stuff going on,
Yeah.
but it had that sort of Pirates of the Caribbean quality where they're all running places and doing stuff, but you're kind of thinking, oh, this is going on a bit. And then I saw it was only just over 2 hours. I was expecting it to have been about 2.5.
Yeah, it was
I think
only
it could have
just
easily lost about 40 minutes and been a really cracking film. And you were saying about the dwarfs. I just found the dwarfs really distracting.
Yeah, me too.
Because I spent the time
Sorry.
thinking about the casting rather than the actual dwarfs. And I was thinking, is that... And there's one dwarf, and I was looking at him thinking, who is that? That's really annoying me. And I think it's Eddie Marsden again. Is it?
Yeah, there's two of him. That is him twice.
I mean, I think sort of overall, if you're going to see one Snow White film this year, this is a better film. It's a much more consistent film than Mirror Mirror, which was a bit too kind of kitschy and it was a bit too, oh, look at us, aren't we being smart and snarky? Whereas this, I thought it was a nice little sort of quest movie, and then I understand what you sort of some of the criticisms of it. I mean, Kirsten Stewart, yeah, I think she's hard done by, but it could have perhaps done with someone with like a bit more zest about them to kind of
that's what
to
it was.
inspire
She
people.
I think she doesn't convince me as the warrior person in the second half.
Yeah.
She can do the whole kind of stuff, but she's not strong enough for me in that role. But I don't know who else I'd put in there, to be honest.
But is Snow White necessarily that character to be?
No, I mean that's very much in this film was taken forward. Is that no? You're right. Because it's a strange character and that she's supposed to be all nature and floaty and just kind of gets along on the magic and the mystery of it all. And so I suppose maybe there's a problem with the actual story they put together there, that the character doesn't quite work.
I mean, sort of overall, I'd recommend going if you're interested in that type of stuff. Then I'd say go and see it. You might just like it. What do you guys think? Would you recommend it?
I would recommend it to people who enjoy Twilight. I thought it was Game of Thrones for Twilight people. That kind of that kind of take on a battle quest, different people coming together, Lord of the Rings type of stuff. I wouldn't necessarily, if you really, really enjoy. I don't want to be too mean, but really good acting, I wouldn't. I wouldn't if you like your ham.
It's not an Oscar piece.
It's not. Well, saying that now, it probably will be. But yeah, I think for people who enjoy Twilight, definitely go and check it out.
Okay. And next we have Men in Black 3. Following last episode's debacle in which we shamefully failed to bother to watch this film, please, has anyone here seen it? And what have I missed?
Yeah, I think me and Claire have both seen it. I went into this film thinking that it would be, and I think I read one of your comments saying that no one laughed at it at all.
Yep.
So this is why it's going to be interesting because I really like this film, and I went into it thinking that it would be awful, and it's not funny, but it was a good story, and it didn't have as many plot holes. Well, time travel is a plot hole to begin with, but it didn't have as many plot holes for a time travel film that I thought it would. I take it you didn't like it.
Well, it's not that I didn't like it. I was just commenting on the reaction from everyone around me.
Okay.
However, I was one of those people who didn't laugh. So
no, I didn't laugh much either. I didn't find it a funny film, which I guess it's supposed to be.
I'm going to say that's a bit of a failure, isn't it? If you're not laughing, if everyone's not laughing,
because the first one I didn't find that funny either. I thought it was just a good story.
Yeah, I suppose.
And I found this kind of harked back to the first one in the sense that they got a good villain. I mean, the second one was so poor, and a lot. Well, not all of it, but a lot of that I think was to do with how bad the villain in it was. The villain in this is called Boris, and I can't remember I can't remember which actor it is.
He's the guy from Flight to the Conchords.
Oh, really?
I can't remember his
Oh,
name
my
right
goodness.
now.
Jermaine
I'm really
Clement's
sorry.
the other one, isn't it? Because Jermaine Clement does the songs.
Well, basically, he looks like he's a big biker dude with a really deep voice, and like the vocal thing was very much a thing with the bug in the first one, and I just thought it worked really well because you have this nasty villain that's genuinely quite not scary, but is pretty damn evil, and he that made it work for me.
Well, when you go into number 3 of 3 films, you go in with expectations because you hope it's going to be as good as the first. I thought, I can't remember his name, the guy who played
Young Tommy Lee Jones.
Young Tommy Lee Jones.
I keep
Josh Brolin.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
I can never remember. I'm not very good with names. He was absolutely phenomenal, and that's the thing that really drove the film.
Because Tommy Lee Jones was actually awful.
He
was
just looked bored.
Maybe he was supposed to be like that, but he just sort of.
Really?
He just looked depressed. I felt sorry for him.
Well, I'm glad that Josh Brolin was good because for me that would be the only reason to go and see it.
Yeah.
I was quite excited by his performance.
Yeah.
From the trailers. We talked about this. We thought the trailers had been dubbed because he was so spot on in his impersonation. But it's just a very good impersonation.
And actually, it's quite interesting that I mentioned about Tommy Lee Jones because the part of the fun was the chemistry between the two actors in the first one, and there's no chemistry between them at the start. But maybe that was maybe I'm giving it too much credit. Maybe they decided to do that because then Will Smith and Josh Brolin start to have a bit of banter, a bit of back and forth, and then that kind of works. I
thought that the film anything with space and aliens in, I'm going to watch it anyway. But the fact that even Will Smith, his character Jay, said halfway through, "I'm too old for this." It led me to think that
was in the trailer as well.
The whole film just thought, oh well, if you're too old for this, I just give up.
It's American Reunion all over again.
It's
hey. But Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And the one thing I would say about it, like I was going back to, it's not very funny. It started at a funeral, and it was just like the first, I think, 10 minutes of it, I was just thinking, oh my God, this is just awful. It's just so depressing.
It was.
And, you know, Tommy Lee Jones makes this awful eulogy of, the person that dies. It's not a huge spoiler. But, and it's just like, oh my God, there's not one funny bit in it. It's just morbid. But then it's sort of, they go back in time and then it gets a bit more interesting and twisty. And they got rid of a lot of the gimmicky stuff as well. So, like, you had the talking dog, which was made into a really big part in the second one, which was pointless. And so that you had, I think the most you had of him was a poster, which was very funny because it was in the 60s and it was like the amazing talking dog. So that was really funny. And then they got rid of the little aliens that chat and say stupid things. And I think you saw them once or twice. But it was good that they did that. It was like, you know, getting rid of Jar Jar Binks for the thing. You know,
which unfortunately didn't happen.
No, it didn't help. No, but it's sort of like that. And I didn't like those gimmicky things. And they sort of went back to basics.
I would disagree.
Yeah.
And only because I think with Men in Black you've got a whole universe of opportunity. You can include any type of alien. Like, the universe is open to any storyline, and they chose this depressing, I'm too old for this storyline. I enjoyed the dog. I enjoyed all the little creatures because it was a bit of fun, and it was taking on a conspiracy theory and then running with it and having fun with it. And I think people get so serious about, oh, this could happen, this could happen. It was so nice to have a little bit of remember when you were a kid and you imagined all these cool stuff and you wanted aliens to come and visit you. I just thought that's what Men in Black is to me, because I just think it's a place where you can just imagine anything, and the story and the creators of it should have that imagination to keep feeding you. And then when they go back in time, I enjoyed that bit, but I wanted to see quirkiness, and it wasn't quirky enough for me.
I mean, do you think now that we're sort of years and must be well over a decade away from stuff like X-Files and the big sort of booming science fiction TV that happened sort of around that time, do you think Men in Black's now just sort of irrelevant?
No, because it's all to do with imagination and fantasy, isn't it? We're never going to know the truth about anything, so why not just have a little bit of fun? I think that's what Men in Black was supposed to be, a comedy, a sci-fi comedy. With any kind of possibilities that could, like, some of it quite serious to say, hey, look at mankind and everything. But also another side of it is to say, look at the possibilities of, you can imagine anything out there. And that's why I like the quirkiness of it.
But I do agree it's not as quirky, but then it must have one of the most quirky characters in the guy that can see lots of different times happening.
See,
he was brilliant. He was a really good character, and without him it wouldn't have worked at all, because he was sort of the heart behind it, and he drove it, and he was just really, really nice, and he played it really well. And I thought he was like the quirkiest of you know, because the way he was, you know, he wore all these overcoats. And he was very, I really liked that part of it.
That's what I want to see more of.
Okay, yeah.
And I mean, he was like a train spotter of time. He was like this complete nerd, time nerd, and that was a brilliant concept. That was the film, as well as Josh Brolin, that made it for me, because I wanted to see more of that quirkiness and more of that, you know, millions of dimensions and.
Yeah. I understand that, and I think maybe the first one had the advantage of having a Will Smith that was new to everything and was discovering everything, which is why you got to see all of the new stuff happening. With this, you need to focus on the plot, so they don't have time to discover all new things. I mean, I get where you're going with it, but and I can see why you wouldn't have liked it because of this, because this was very much focused on, right, let's do the plot, let's not introduce too many things.
Yeah.
But I think it might not have worked, because I think in the second one they tried to introduce too many things, so they had stupid jackass Johnny, whatever his name is, and they had the other villain, and it overcrowded it, and that's why I thought this worked well, because they didn't try and crowbar in stupid aliens. But I always like the ending to Men in Black, where they have, you know, the universes within universes. Did they do that in this? I didn't stay to the end, but well, no, I didn't sit there after the end credits. I
didn't saw half of it.
But it was great.
Yeah, they did something at the end, because I just felt this film was so removed from the other two, emotionally wise.
Yeah.
As well, there was, even though number 2 had like somebody expressing more emotions, like they wanted to go home, this one was trying to find your own truth, and so it was more of an inward look at Earthlings rather than aliens. And I think it was trying to focus on Earth people more than aliens. If that makes sense. That probably doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So you enjoyed it and would recommend it, or go and see the first one again?
If you're into aliens in space, I always say go and see anything you can because it is a good story, and take from the story what you want. And that's what I do.
It is kind of an interesting, the way they do it with the story. It's interesting because they kind of almost change your perception of the first film. Yeah. But obviously they hadn't written the first film with the third one in mind, so it would be very weird going back and thinking, well, now I know this happened. Then, But no, I really, like you said, I thought the story was really good. It wasn't as funny as the first one, and perhaps it didn't do as many interesting things as the first one did. But it's much better than the second. So watch the first and the third, and leave the second, in my opinion.
Welcome to the part of the show where we discuss any films that we have recently seen. Pete?
I've watched a couple, but none of them were that interesting and worth mentioning. I did watch The Player recently, which I'd actually only watched the start of, which is that really long shot which tracks everyone, which I really love. So I thought, well, I've actually got to get round to watching it. It's basically about a Hollywood executive that reads people's scripts and either puts them on and presents them to the studio and says we want this as a movie, or says no. And basically it's a sort of story within a story. It kind of it's very, I thought it was very clever. And they kind of have things happening to Tim Robbins, who plays this executive, that he would be seeing scripts about, and it kind of plays it off that way, and it becomes this sort of kind of murder mystery, not mystery, but kind of a murder film. And it's, you're following Tim Robbins doing all these things, and without giving away too much, to be honest. But anyway, it's very good, and go and see it. Well, don't go and see it, but buy it. If it's still in the cinema, it might be still in the cinema.
I don't think it is.
Okay, and Claire?
I watched The Artist last night. I got it on Blu-ray. Looked fantastic. Acting in it was phenomenal. I use that word quite a lot, but I do mean it was really good. Even the dog was just incredible. Really geekily, I really want to read the script because I'm fascinated to see how they actually wrote it in order to direct people. Because there must have been a script because you could see them actually speaking. You just couldn't hear anything. But it's just such an interesting way that I've seen of how to make a film driven by action. And so I would definitely recommend it to everyone. Absolutely loved it. I need to watch it again because I'm still trying to digest it. But there was a couple of really interesting faces that you hadn't seen for a while, and I thought, oh, it's them from that. But it didn't kind of stop me from watching the film. It kind of got me more engrossed into it because there were some recognisable people and also some new people I wouldn't have been exposed to. So yeah, just really great. I would love to be able to say more about it, but I need to watch it again in order to...
Yeah, because we quite enjoyed it when we...
Loved it, absolutely.
Did you like it, Pete?
I haven't seen it. I think we did a review of The Artist, and then we've done, I think, 2 reviews of The Artist on 2 different podcasts,
we have,
and I've yet to see it.
It is that good. It is that good.
It's just great storytelling. It's got the old-fashioned dance routines. It's got the sets that you kind of half theatre, half stage and screen. You got a glimpse into the backstage of how people would make these films, and it just kind of really engrossed you into the whole filmmaking process, similar to I think how Hugo did, where you can actually see behind the scenes of what was happening. So it got you not only interested in the story but how they made the story, which then made me think, oh, I really want to read the script to that and get more information about it.
And Tom?
From the sublime to the ridiculous, I watched the 1990 version of Captain America the other night.
Brilliant.
In a kind of... I found it on Amazon and thought, I've not seen that probably since about 1992. I'm just intrigued. And apparently I'd made up a completely different film in my head from what I remember as a child to what's actually on the DVD. I remember not thinking it was amazing, but liking it when I first saw it. And there being a lot more set during World War II than actually there ends up being in the finished version. And yeah, it's a really odd movie. It's just like Marvel seemed to do this thing sort of through when DC were doing Batman and getting massive. Marvel sort of had a go and failed miserably. And one of the few things that was released was the Captain America one, where you can see like he's wearing the Captain America suit is like it is in the comics, but you can see it's got sort of padding underneath it to give him a six-pack and things like that. You tell it's not a real six-pack, it's part of the suit. And it does do something which is quite cool from the comics, where it takes the Red Skull and sort of unreds his skull, basically, but doesn't do anything with it, whereas the comic makes it a whole thing. This film just sort of goes, we can't really afford to do the makeup. We'll just put some scars on him. Rather than doing the whole Red Skull thing for the whole film, we'll just put some scars on him and say, yeah, he had some surgery to cover it over. Yeah. And it's just really bizarre. And then, Cap gives the thumbs up to the camera in the middle of a fight scene at the end, which just intrigued as to what Marvel thought they were doing when they made that. And then they made the Fantastic Four, which never got released even. So, it's, but if you're a fan of the Avengers, it's worth having a look at of curiosity.
So what did you think of the new Captain America film?
I really like the new Captain America film, but because it does what Cap should be as an origin story, which is setting it in World War II and saying, this is where this guy comes from. And obviously it was setting up for the Avengers as well. But I really like the new one, but this 1991 is just weird.
And Russ?
I had the unfortunate pleasure of seeing Transformers 3. It's my own fault because I have seen Transformers 1 and 2. One thing I would say is if you like Transformers 2, you'll probably love Transformers 3. But in brackets at the side of that, if you like Transformers 2, you are an idiot.
Right.
Because Transformers 2 is one of the worst films ever made, basically. It's just horrific. And then this one isn't as bad as 2, but it's pretty close. I mean, it's just there's no general peril even if you were looking on the back of the little box we on the DVD, it would say it had mild peril. This has no peril. It's just machines hitting each other with the voices, and then it's got Shia LaBeouf's little cheeky face that you just want to punch all the time. And then it's got the girl, Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, who Michael Bay obviously loves because she just dresses up and runs around. That is it. Honestly, that's it. You don't need to watch the film. That's what happens. It looks good. It looks very good. I mean, I read somewhere when it came out, I read a review. I think even someone like Mark Commode even said, this film is terrible, but the last hour is the best 3D you'll ever see. And I didn't see it in 3D, but he said it's just amazing, because there's buildings falling down, and you imagine that's what 3D was made for, that kind of crazy things flying around and stuff going on. I can't imagine he's right, to be honest with you, because even if I saw it in 3D, it would still be rubbish. Horrendous. Don't watch it again. Or ever, throw it away.
Okay, and just finally, I've after some discussions on Facebook a few weeks ago, I finally got round to rewatching Silence of the Lambs.
You don't like it, do you?
I've got to say, you're
an idiot.
It's not as bad as I remembered
it.
I mean, Scott Glenn is brilliant, and they've seemingly dressed him really bizarrely as a 1940s G-man in it, which is fantastic. And sort of any film with cameos from like Chris Isaac and Roger Corman is really, really worth watching. But it's just not as satisfying as the really trashy Psycho films from that time, like stuff like Single White Female and Malice, and even like Sleeping with the Enemy, which were real
I enjoyed that film.
Yeah,
they're quite terrible. They're quite terrible in their own way, but there's something quite trashily exciting about them. And it's just Anthony Hopkins.
You love Manhunter too much to like Silence of the Lambs.
I think that's the problem.
And that's fair enough.
But Hopkins, did no one say, just turn it down a bit? For me, it just doesn't work. Although it's really nice to see that when he escapes, he seems to think the best way to go in unnoticed in the Bahamas is to dress up as Truman Capote. He's got this blonde wig and a white suit, and he's la-di-daring. It's brilliant. It's but no, I can see why people like it, but it's like The Shawshank Redemption. It's just a film that I just don't get, and it annoys me that I don't get it as well. Anyway, enough of that. Here is Prometheus.
Prometheus has landed.
These are ancient civilizations from all over the Earth. And yet, this same pictogram was discovered at every one of them.
It's a star map.
Not a map, an invitation.
From whom?
We call them engineers.
Do you mind telling us what they engineered?
They engineered us.
If you're going down there, you're going to die.
So here we have Prometheus, Ridley Scott's Alien prequel, or the start of a series of Alien prequels, or whatever. I'm not quite sure what it's been positioned as sometimes. Who wants to take a stab at describing what Prometheus is about? There's some confused faces.
Just narrative-wise?
Yeah, just narrative-wise. What's going on?
Okay, Prometheus is about... Well, we'll kind of start from the human perspective. We won't start from the kind of narrative of the film perspective because it gets a little bit confusing, I suppose. Prometheus is about a group of scientists who have been kind of looking at old ancient cave paintings, tablet etchings from around the world, and they think they've discovered a star map left behind by people who they imagine to be our creators, in the form of aliens. What they are termed in the film as our engineers. And so this is set in the future. I think starts off in 2039, something like that, and then moves forward to like 2093. I think by the time they're actually in space. And so basically, they are funded to go off on a space mission to find this planet at the center of the star map, in the hope to find our creators and talk to them. Needless to say, things happen. It may not all go to plan, and some stuff goes on. Really, actually, we are giving stuff away, aren't we? Sorry, I forgot. This is our spoiler review. So what? How God, loads happen. So they land on the planet and they kind of find this structure that obviously isn't of human origin or of the planet's natural origins. It's been built by someone. They all go inside. They find some alien-like kind of pods inside a massive room. David the android, played by Michael Fassbender, I'm sure we'll be talking about him as well because he's excellent in it, goes a little bit kind of doolally and decides to kind of, he has strangely different motives to everyone else kind of on board. He's a very kind of twisted character in terms of that. And then kind of, like I say, in classic Alien, what's the word I'm looking for? Style, all hell does break loose, really. Quite to more of a degree than I thought ever would, if I'm honest with you. I kind of didn't expect it to go as far in terms of the horror aspect of it all. And I was quite happy for that because I'm a kind of a big horror fan anyway. And there are some fantastic set pieces in there that were very squirm-inducing and a bit icky and all the goo and stuff. And that was great. I thought
nice to watch with a 27-week pregnant wife.
Of course. Oh, Christ, yeah.
Although I think I was more affected than she was. She was quite happy with it.
For people who haven't seen it, there is a fantastic scene where someone gives themselves a cesarean section, basically, which is very interesting. Like I say, when I sat watching that with my mouth aghast, they're like, is he really going to do this? He is going to do this. It was quite impressive. And it's hard to talk about because it's such a big film. The sheer scale of the film in terms of themes and ideas and kind of what it's trying to say and what it's not trying to say in terms of not trying to... It doesn't tie itself neatly up in a bow, particularly. I think it does leave certain things trailing. And since watching it, I think it is... I tend to see films twice, not regularly. That's the wrong word, not the wrong phrase. But I'm not a big second watcher of things because I not like straight away. But this is one of those films that I kind of walked out of and then kind of went, I need to see that again because there's a lot going on there that I didn't quite totally compute while I watched it. I did really enjoy it, and I think it's a real big, intelligent, adult sci-fi movie, which I think is possibly one of the hardest genres to get right. I think that there's a lot of bad sci-fi out there for that reason, not because it's just rubbish, just because it's difficult to do well. And I really enjoyed that about it, and I think a lot of the criticisms of it have come because of that, and I think that's really stupid because it would have been so much easier for Ridley Scott to just go and make Alien. He could have done that and he could have walked away and everyone would have gone, wow, that was brilliant, yeah, just like seeing Alien again. But what's the point in doing that? He tried to do something different, and yeah, not all of it works. There's certain bits towards the end when I was sat there going, I didn't really like that. There's big CGI monstery bit at the end that I wasn't particularly keen on, and they had Guy Pearce in really old makeup.
No, that was the most pointless thing.
I don't quite see why they bothered with that.
No,
for me, they could have had an older actor in that role, and it wouldn't have been any different. Apart from, obviously, I know it ties in with the marketing material they put out with it from the start. But I don't think they needed to do that. And there are a couple of moments of leap of faith in terms of exposition where a character would seemingly explain something that Idris Elba's was the most... I think at one point he kind of says, oh yeah, they're building a weapon to go and destroy Earth, and now they're just because they built Earth and all that kind of stuff. And I was thinking, well, where'd you get that from, Idris? You've been sat on the ship for the last 2 hours. I'm not quite sure where you pulled that one out from.
He is Stringer Bell, though.
Well,
so,
that was my defence. Someone else, I'm like, well, he is a captain, so he's probably quite clever at stuff. But that doesn't really work either. But a film without negatives, when does that ever turn up? You never get the perfect film that hasn't got certain problems and issues with it. And, I think hats off to Ridley Scott for creating something that's massive and different and interesting and bold and just good as well. Because I've seen Space 2001, and I hate it. I'm going to say that on the podcast. I might get stoned for saying that. I watched it and I was bored to tears with the slowness.
I'm sorry, and people have got a problem that I don't like Silence of the Lambs.
They have, because Silence of the Lambs
Shawshank
is brilliant. But yeah, I have to say, I don't like Space 2001 at all. It really bugs me, and I was worried that this would be a lot like that. But I think it's taken all the good bits out of that and transferred them into something a bit more complete and a bit more, just bloody interesting, to be honest with you, because let's face it, Space 2001's dull as ditch water, isn't it? And so there you go. That's me getting controversial on the podcast. Feel free to comment on YouTube or Facebook.
Did anyone find the film less than satisfying or disappointing? Tom, you sort of got your hand raised.
Yeah, so I'm still not totally sure whether I like it.
Right.
Or not.
Okay. What's the?
I just sort of thought they had some really good ideas for films, and they decided to try and make all of them at once.
Right.
And so it was kind of, there was some good horror bits in it, but it wasn't enough horror-y bits to make it a really storming horror film. There was some good action-adventure stuff in it, but it wasn't enough to make it a full-on great action-adventure film. And there was some good kind of, like the 2001 type of thinky stuff in there, but it wasn't quite enough to make it a good, thoughtful sci-fi film. It had bits of all of them, and just in the end left me going, well, what do you want me to take away from this? There was loads of stuff that was really good, but all just kind of thrown at me. And then a whole thing with Guy Pearce turning up at the end was sort of like, well, where did he come from? Why has that been thrown in? You could have... It's fine that it's there, but it doesn't add anything. And yeah, it just left me sort of going, well, what? Definitely need to see it again to see if I can get any more out of it and figure out what they were trying to do beyond set up for a sequel. But yeah, it was just kind of lots of good ideas, but none that they really stuck to and went with.
Okay. And Claire, what do you think of it? I mean, does it fit in with the Alien saga?
Yes and no. I mean, it's a really... I think Ridley Scott wants to do 3 films. So this is the first into what he wants to do with the other 2. And this is the scary thing, is that it could turn into Star Wars Episode 1, 2 and 3. And then he says by the 3rd film, it's going to link into what we know as Alien. So from that, I think and this is what I took away from it. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I don't know if there is a right or wrong, but this is going to sound really nerdy, but as someone said to me once when I was taking some class or something, but in order to look at the astro, we must look at the quantum. And I think this is what this film did. It looked at, yes, that we could have engineers, we could have people out there, but what does that say about us? What does that say about our soul? And so that's where I think David was a really interesting character, because it then brought into more of the story of who is David, and it was claimed that he doesn't have a soul, and yet his action told us something completely different. And so it was taking the engineers created or started evolution, and then mankind produced David, and I thought it was more of that story than it was anything to do with aliens, because I think without skipping too far ahead of the story, we didn't actually know what the motive behind the aliens were at the end, or our engineers, but we did get a glimpse into the motive behind David. And so I thought, for me, it didn't relate to Alien, but it related to the androids and going on to Blade Runner and all that kind of story, if that makes
it's
sense.
quite interesting, because people have sort of picked loads of different bits sort of around the film. I was having a discussion about it with a friend the other night, and we sat there for about half an hour and just really picked out little bits, say, oh, this bit wasn't quite... I don't know what that bit was doing in there. This bit was a bit annoying, and so on and so forth. But then at the end, I said, "Oh, it's quite good though. I quite enjoyed it." I mean, Pete, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I actually. Interesting. People have said like I need to watch it again, and it's taken me a while. I literally spent sort of a couple of hours just reading about it,
I did
thinking
the same.
about it.
Just having not read much about it before, I went on afterwards and just pulled through loads of stuff.
I actually really, really enjoyed it at the time. And then I thought back to it and really didn't like it. And then I had a bit more reading around it, and then I thought, no, I did like it. But it is one of those things that I have to watch. I mean, did everyone understand? I mean, there was some, like you said, there's some big ideas in it, and like you were saying, Tom, it's kind of, what the hell is this film? It's so many things, and then at the end, it's just this huge action. I was thinking, what the hell's going on? Why have we gone from, you know, ideas about life to a big spaceship crashing and people running away from it and sort of diving to the side in a really, you know, cliched action type thing? The biggest problem I have with this film is the characters. They're just so awful. None of them are well written at all. There's no, apart from the husband who gets infected with the DNA changing stuff. I mean, I don't like him because he was in 24 and he really irritated me in 24. So I had these preconceptions of him. And he also was in the OC, actually. Anyway, he was the most well written character. The Noomi Rapace, I just thought she had nothing. She was no Sigourney Weaver at all, and everyone just seemed very flat. And Idris Elba was just there. He was just there. He was a captain, and as for Stringer Bell, he puts on a very good sort of Baltimore accent. I didn't know what he was. Was he American? I couldn't even. Yeah, he was awful. He was Southern, like sometimes I was thinking he just said, it wasn't even an American accent. Then sometime he went into an American accent, and it was all right. But it was really off-putting. And I think that was, for me, it was his biggest problem, was the characters weren't well enough written.
I had a problem with the biologist running away from the alien body.
Yeah.
What biologist would run away
but also,
from an alien body?
That's a contradiction, because then he runs away from the alien body, right? And then this thing comes out of the water. He's like, oh, I wonder what's going on here.
He was the biggest letdown for me, because when I heard that Rafe Spall was in it, I was really excited, because having watched him in The Shadow Line, which was a series on BBC earlier on in the year, and he was this amazingly dark kind of gangster character, and he played some really light stuff beforehand, so his range for me was clearly amazing, and I think he just got totally shortchanged. It was because him and Fifield, you know, the guy he got stuck there with, when I kind of saw the original images of them, I was like, right, Rafe Spall, I love him, he's great. I don't know who this is. Sean Harris is his name, I think, the character, the actor even. And I thought, wow, his look is really interesting. You know, he's got these tattoos at the side of his head.
He's a thug geologist.
Yeah, geologist, really interesting. And they both just turned into alien fodder quite quickly. Yeah. And then Fifield turns up. That was a bit weird when Fifield turns up again later as a bit of a monster, which was a bit odd. He kind of came out of nowhere and just got flamed. And that was kind of it. But yeah, so that I was a bit disappointed in that. And I think you're right, Pete, in terms of the characterisation of some of them wasn't. I haven't got that much of a problem with it as you have, Pete. But I think it was a little bit. For me, there were too many characters. There were a lot of people on that ship who I never met, and then they turn up at moments. Yeah. Like,
Red shirts.
Just moving this around and lifting that, and then they just end up dying. It was a little bit like just throw some more people at it. They could have spent a bit more time just honing a few of them as opposed to spreading it out among.
Because I know it's perhaps unfair to compare it to the other films from the Alien saga, because they are about very different things. But what those films do quite well is strip away the unknown characters very quickly and leave you with sort of a core, a really good core. I mean, I thought sort of the interesting thing about the character, I don't think Noomi Rapace was supposed to be
a Ripley
character.
I agree. I don't think she was.
And I found
I didn't mean in terms of, you know, she just wasn't a good enough. She wasn't well written enough. I didn't. I mean, I know what you're saying. I didn't think she was supposed to be another Ripley Mark II, but I just didn't think her character was written as well as Ripley was.
I mean, I think she was quite a soft character to have in the middle of that team. Not soft as in sort of weak, but kind of a more bad choice of words, but a more sort of emotionally tuned character than the rest of them. And I thought it was quite interesting that Charlize Theron's character Vickers was a lot more like Ripley. Because you had that nice parallel in the first Alien. It's Ripley who doesn't want them to come back in. Yeah. It's Ripley who's going to shut them out and stop anything
She's a pragmatist.
happening.
You know, don't be stupid. Don't let emotion rule it. You know, you've got to be quite strong and single-minded in
it. Those people, they were the most emotional because Ripley was a mother, and we're looking at the character in Prometheus. She was the opposite. She was more emotional, but then got rid of she had the surgery, and the same with Charlize's character Vickers. She got very emotional at the end. So these barriers are being held up, but it's all kind of opposite to what you expect in Alien, apart from Vickers' character.
I mean, I think the one character thing I didn't quite buy was the captain and the two pilots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At the end, when they crash, they essentially stop the ship leaving by crashing the Prometheus into it. I didn't quite buy that sudden...
That they would do that.
Heroic motivation. I knew it was kind of some groundwork laid with the captain kind of twigging maybe what's going on. Because I think one of the interesting things about it is that they still don't know what that planet could be. They could be doing something entirely different there.
Yeah.
It's only based on a lot of
findings
guesswork and such by them, but this is what's happening. But I didn't quite buy that. I didn't quite buy that the two guys would go, yeah, all right, we'll stay with you then, whilst you die in a flame ball.
No, yeah.
And it's from guesswork, isn't it?
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
I mean, I thought the opening 15 minutes was one of the best I've seen of the year. Like that, the whole the panning shots through this kind of strange world, and then kind of this alien figure kind of standing up there. And I thought at that point you might have lost some people because they might have seen that alien figure and gone, that looks a bit silly. Because it did at first. You're like, it's interesting, and if you didn't go with it, you were going to get kind of thrown away quite quickly. But then even that first kind of 5 minutes on the when David was waking them all up out of stasis. I mean, he's walking around by himself. I thought that was just brilliant. I thought that was really interesting how they... actually, that wasn't the opening 5 minutes. That was afterwards, obviously, when they're on board the Prometheus. It's a skip forward a bit, but that bit in itself was really interesting because that was kind of when it twigged for me that he was going to be centre of attention throughout a lot of this film, and I was quite surprised at how he was. I thought he was just going to be an android that is involved in the story, knowing the history of the Alien franchise, and they're always in the thick of it. But how much he took front and centre stage was quite. I liked that, and his performance is phenomenal, and everyone's kind of talked about it. But I thought his connection with the whole Lawrence of Arabia theme was just genius.
That was interesting.
Just so
trying
clever.
To find out who he was.
It was, and just they're dyeing his hair, and it's the same kind of as Laurence Olivier, and the whole thematic kind of binding of Lawrence of Arabia as a man going into the desert and changing sides and then fighting for the opposition, and then I link that in with a David character who's kind of looking at doing the same kind of thing. It's one of those great things that I love where it almost gives everything away, but it doesn't because it's so intelligent and so clever. That even if it did, it doesn't matter because you're happy that they put it in there. And I thought that bit was astonishing.
It's interesting. In Lawrence of Arabia, the character of Lawrence is a really hard character to actually get a handle on because he's sort of a bit of a blank as well.
He's a bit of a blank
very
canvas.
Much someone who's defined by
his actions,
what he's doing, and defined by the situation he's in. And I just thought it was a very strange trailer. And I've got to say, I mean, you saw it in 3D as well.
I did.
Are you not petrified by the thought of retrofitted Lawrence of Arabia? It looked awful. It was like they sort of cut out Peter O'Toole and
pushed him forward.
And I thought someone somewhere is watching that and thinking, yes,
that's a great idea.
Let's get Lawrence of Arabia and 3D. I mean, what do people think about the David character then? Because it's such an odd character. It kind of references, I think, kind of Hal from 2001.
Yeah.
But also characters like Joe from AI. Because I think by the time Aliens comes around, the androids have become a lot less of a suspicious entity, and that they're openly placed in crews and so on. I mean, I know he's sort of openly placed in this one, but what's going on there between Wayland and David and Vickers?
Well, I thought Prometheus was about David, and I mean Wayland was David's engineer. These aliens were humans' engineers, and I just thought it was, he just drove the whole story into the end. But with Prometheus, one of the things that I felt disappointed with, which I felt that David's character didn't do, was most of the story was pulled along by dialogue and not necessarily by action. Like we got told all these things that were going to happen, so you kind of knew later on that was going to be relevant. But with David's character, he did remain the only kind of solid character throughout the entirety of it, which you kind of could... every time you saw him, you felt, oh, he's going to pull the story through his action, not necessarily by something he's going to say.
I mean, are the Alien films more about the robots than they are about the aliens sometimes? Which is if you watch sort of especially the first two.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's just you might be able to hear the washing machine upstairs. I don't know. But the first two are very much defined entirely by the robots, I find.
Well, the robots always have a massive role to play in terms of plot. I mean, I suppose the problem is that in the first one, especially you didn't know Ash was a robot in the first one. And I remember that. Yeah, there's that amazing scene where the kind of the custards dropping down his face, and I was watching that as a kid and thinking, what is going on? And then he freaks out, tries to smother Ripley and all that. So I think there's a different role to be played, but I think that does always hint at the suspicion. I think because of what's come before, we are always suspicious of the androids and kind of that whole Alien franchise. And the fact that the film ends with David's head in a bag being carried on when he's still going, I think it's just a lovely thing because they always end up completely ripped apart. Yeah. And it seems to be at that point that they become helpful because Lance Henriksen in the second one, gets destroyed by an alien, but he's kind of helping out at the end, isn't he, as well? It's kind of, I think they played more on that in the second one, having had Ash as a negative kind of character in the first one, and then Lance Henriksen was just slightly more ambiguous in the second, and then obviously now you've got something a bit completely different anyway. But I mean, so yeah, I did enjoy it, like we said. I think we've all said you need to watch it again. So if Ridley Scott's aim was to sell tickets, then he's done a good job because he's left a film that everyone's going to go and see twice.
I've got to say, there are sort of like I said before, there are elements where you can really pick it apart. I think I'd have been more satisfied if that had have been the planet, if it had have been a one-off film.
Yeah.
Because everything seemed to really, towards the end of the film, they seemed to sort of set up the situation of Alien, but just on a completely different planet. And there's the messages left and don't come here, and the ship kind of falls in the same way, and you're kind of thinking, why didn't they just... Is anyone else getting a bit tired of, like, sequel upon sequel, and this is only... Because I remember ages ago thinking this about Avatar, and I'm tired of this idea about 17 years ago I wrote 3 prequels to Star Wars, and what a load of rubbish. I don't believe it at all. But I think I'd have been much more satisfied if it was a contained film in itself. So what's the sort of overall verdict? I mean, I'd say certainly very pickable, but I thought it was quite brilliant. I've seen it twice, and having had a load of reservations about it, thoroughly enjoyed it both times. What's everyone else's sort of final verdict?
I think any film that you can sit in a room and talk about for an hour quite happily is a good one in my book. I think it's got enough going on there. It's solid enough. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to go and see it again, which I hardly ever do. So for me personally, it's a winner. I'd definitely go and see it.
Tom?
Yeah, I'm still not sure. I think it's good. It's definitely not a bad film in any way, shape or form, and I do want to see it again. But I want to see it again more to work out what's going on than because I think, wow, that was amazing. I want to see it again. So yeah, it's a slightly odd one, but it's
And Claire?
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and there was a lot of compromises in the film, but hopefully that will be, if there is another film coming out, or version of the film coming out, I definitely want to see that. But recommend it to anyone who's into sci-fi, and I would like to have seen a lot more about the ancient history kind of stuff. I thought that, to me, really hooked me into it, especially talking about engineers. Once again, it hooked onto conspiracy theories and ancient texts and stuff. So even if you're just into that, I would definitely recommend this film.
Okay, and Pete, final word on Prometheus.
Final words. Just to sum it up, again, I have to go back to the characters because I'll start by saying I really did enjoy it, and I'll watch it again. And like Ross said, something we can talk about for an hour has got to be fairly decent. And you were mentioning about the possible sequels and stuff. And I'm like you, Wynter. I don't want usually any more. Like Avatar, for instance, there's just no need. But for this, like you were saying, if it does it well and it picks up on these themes, and what you were saying with David is that theme is the best. That was one of my favourite bits about it, was that engineers created us, we created David. That's the whole dynamic, and that was really interesting. And I hope that they pick up on that a bit more. So I'm interested to see where the sequels go, and I wait till they come out to judge them before and that. This one, the characters were disappointing only because, and you know, you said compare it to Alien before, Wynter, and I just can't help it. The characters are so, you know who each one of them is. Whereas, you know, we were talking about the two guys on the ship that were just there and just to die at the end and say, yeah, well, you need some help because you're a bad pilot, which is literally the only thing they said. So I didn't get that. A lot of the characters make really stupid decisions, and you think, well, why? That they get there and they go, oh, it's going to be night soon. What should we do? We could wait and, you know, have lots of time, or we could go in now and have 10 minutes. So, oh yeah, no, we'll go in now. It's fine. Why? And it just really irritated me. Other than that, I really liked it. And, sorry, I didn't mind at the time, but thinking back to it, it's just the characters. And when she gets the thing cut out of her, and she knocks these two people out, she runs off. She's not mentioned again. David mentions it once that she had something cut out of her. The other guy, she's covered in blood.
She goes
There's blood everywhere in the. Sorry.
She goes abseiling.
Yeah.
Late after her operation.
But yeah, and she shows no. I wanted a scene where she sort of, not broke down, but almost sort of showed some sign that I just went through a really horrific ordeal, and that just didn't happen.
The anaesthetic in 2093 is phenomenal. Sorting right out.
But one of the good things about it, and I think this is. It might sound weird to say, but I think a lot of films do this, like Avatar, for instance. There was no love story in it, and that was so refreshing because it didn't get bogged down in this because it had no need to it, and it had so many concepts that it had to try and get across. A love story would have got in the way, and I'm just so glad it didn't have that because it didn't need. And I know it's a weird thing to say, but there's so many films that sort of you think, well, why are you going down this route when you could be, you know, answering all these questions? Anyway, sorry, final word. I really enjoyed it, apart from the characterization.
So thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also like us via the Guernsey Film Info page on Facebook. In the next episode, oh lordy, we will be reviewing Red Tail.
You will. You'll be reviewing it.
Okay, well, you've got Rock of Ages then.
Alright, I can take that.
5-year engagement and the light at the end of a terrible tunnel, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. As well as the new releases on DVD and Blu-ray. Until next time, this was 24 Lives Per Second, Guernsey's only film podcast.
Bye.